times that we spend. I'll make a payment plan for all that I learned, and I'll forget all of the lies you regret. I close my eyes, look to the skies, pretend we never met. I'd love to take us back to that time and place. I'd love to smack that fucking look off your face.
Welcome to Cutthroat Queens podcast, where we believe that every person deserves to be their authentic selves, unapologetically, without fear or judgment. We're here to take an open and honest look at all things indie horror. My name is Brett Mitchell-Kent, and I am joined by the dashing chair of the Tooth Fairy Sighting Club, Elton Skelter.
Hi, Brett. Happy Pride Month to you.
Hello, happy Pride Month.
So it's here. It's finally here. It's the big month for the queer community, and we are looking forward to celebrating it with some of our amazing guests today. Who have we got on?
So I was able to sit down with Rae Knowles, who's the author of a couple of awesome things that are released/releasing. Stradivarius is one of them. And then who did you sit down with?
Oh, I sat down with Lor Gislason, and we talked about their novella, Inside Out, which is an amazing body horror collection. And we talked about the Goop Troop, which is a joint effort that they have going with Eric Ragland and Shelley Levine. Really exciting stuff. And then the two of us, we got together and we double teamed the guys from Slashic Horror Press.
Yes. So David Jack Fletcher, and I'm going to get this right this time, and Leeroy Cross James. And they are the founders, editor, marketing, we talk about it, for the new Slashic Horror Press, which is a queer-focused press.
David Jack Fletcher is also the author of the brand new release, Ravens Creek, that has come out today. So we're going to be getting into that with him, and we will end the show with a really, really nice reading from that book. So should we take it away?
Yeah, let's get talking to him.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to sit down with Lor, and we are going to talk Goop.
I'm gonna break the things you try hard to mend and pretend it's the end when we've only just begun. So when you're ready to come back, this coffin's made for two.
Okay, and we are the Cutthroat Queens. We're here with Lor Gislason, and we are going to be talking to them today about all things horror, everything we've got. So welcome, Lor, and happy Pride Month to you.
Happy Pride Month to you too.
So thank you very much for coming on. It's really exciting to have you here. We're really, really happy that you are here. You've just got me today because we are dividing and conquering, so we can fit as many people on as we can to just celebrate the huge rainbow of the queer spectrum this month. So why don't you introduce yourself a little? Tell me a bit about yourself.
My name is Lor. I'm from a small town on Vancouver Island in Canada. I write a lot of what has become known as goopy horror, where bad things happen to people and people's insides. I wrote a novella called Inside Out, and I edited the Bound in Flesh anthology of trans body horror for Ghoulish Books. And I talk about him a lot. So I have a cat named Pierogi Platter who I love very much.
And will they be joining us today?
He's sleeping right now, which is good because he otherwise would be very annoying.
Okay. So I've recently listened to an interview you did on Ledger podcast. So my thoughts today was just not to try and cover too much of the familiar ground, but to ask you a few more questions that were sort of outside of that about your upcoming work, if you're happy with that.
Yep.
So your writing is like very visceral, and there is no better word to describe it than goopy. And that kind of, it feels to me like a lot of sort of body horror cinema sort of styles. Is your work inspired by a lot of films you watch, or sort of more of the medium that you read?
Yeah, I think it's more film. I'm a very visual person, and my introduction to horror was through film. So I think having the image in my mind as if it's a film probably helps. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Hellraiser, so I'm sure that comes across a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So what exactly about sort of body horror is it that really speaks to you? Why is it body horror, not anything else that you might want to sort of look into in horror?
Man, that's a hard question, but I think most of it is the creativity and like the amount of things that you can do with the human body and other bodies, through all mediums, through movies, you have all of the practical effects and CGI. Through books, you have all of the descriptions of things that happen. And then video games also are a great way to showcase body horror, either by the player or the environment. It like, I don't know, it hits that one part of my brain that makes me happy. Yeah.
The creativity side of you. Yeah, I do. I recently read Inside Out, and I got very much sort of sort of 1980s horror, kind of a bit sort of Nightmare on Elm Street special effects kind of feel to it, with a lot of
Nice.
melting bodies, some like really Cronenbergian kind of stuff in there as well. It was just, yeah. And the best thing about it as well is I really, really love, I said this to you the other day, I really, really love your narrative voice, because it's easy to relate to. It sort of straddles that bit between sort of grotesque but literary as well, and I kind of just love that. I find it really, really easy to relate to, and so yeah, just massive fan. Just wanted to say that.
Well, I really appreciate it.
So you're soon going to let the world see the Goop Troop. Yes. Tell me about the Goop Troop. How did it start? Who is in the Goop Troop?
So Goop is like how I describe my horror, and I just started calling me and my friend Eric Ragland and my other friend Shelley Levine the Goop Troop, because we write a lot of gross stuff and we have a camaraderie about that. And I was lamenting about how some open calls are like, no extreme horror, and we're like, oh well, I guess we can't write for them now. And we were like, well, what if we just had our own collection of really gross horror? And it kind of blossomed from there. So we each have a couple stories, and they're all sort of introduced as almost moral lessons by the creature on the cover, which is a totem of pig heads that the cover artist Val drew. And we were like, that's so cool. We're going to incorporate it into the book. Hopefully pre-orders will be up soon. I don't know when, because Amazon is stinky about it, but I'm pretty excited. And hopefully if it does well, we'll do a second one.
Excellent. And are you self-publishing that one, or is that one going through a press?
That one's going through Darklit Press, which is the same one that did Inside Out.
And Toothworms.
Yes.
Loved Toothworms. Just a little aside here as well, you can get Toothworms on Godless at the moment for 99 cents, and it does include the MP3 audio book file with it as well. I bought that the other day and it was such a steal. I just have to shout that one out. So go and get it now. Okay, so let's talk about Inside Out. I didn't know what to expect going into it, because I've never really read body horror to that goopy extreme before. So where did it start? Because obviously it's a collection of stories that all file into the same narrative. So what sort of drew the inspiration for that for you?
It came directly from a dream that I had. There's a chapter called The Patrol, where there's a guy who gets sort of infected and starts melting. And that was my dream from his perspective. And I woke up and I was like, oh man, I really need to write that down. And then it kept branching out from there. I'd have another idea. So they're very naturally were short stories. And I was like, oh, well, I guess these take place in the same world. So I guess it's like part collection, part novella. And they do have a connecting thread between them, but they can also be taken by themselves, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interestingly done as well, the way you've taken that sort of epistolary, is that how you say it? Epistolary sort of approach to it, where you've got some of its diary entries, some of its crime reports, some of it's just from the person's perspective. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can get in there. How much of sort of the idea of a pandemic was inspired by what we've all just been through?
It didn't start pandemic inspired. I think COVID was like just starting when I started writing it. But as I continued, it started to feel more and more like it was impossible for me to not have been inspired by it, just because of everything we were going through. And it was so everywhere all the time, horrible stress. So there are a few parts that are definitely directly from COVID. Like there's a part where a guy's watching basically Big Brother, because I saw that clip of Big Brother where they're like, hey guys, I know we've been stuck in this house for a couple months, but also this thing called COVID is happening outside. And like how are you supposed to react in that situation to have this information? And I have a news conference where I use some very stale COVID language that like every politician uses to talk to people.
These are unprecedented times. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I hate that word now. Can't use it
Can you pay me every time they say that? Because I would love that. I'm so tired the way people talk about things.
Oh yeah, I remember that Big Brother clip as well. Just how bizarre it was, because even watching Big Brother is like just a weird step away from reality in itself. It doesn't feel like reality, even though it's supposed to be reality TV. It seems so ridiculous. But then watching them explain the sort of real-time effects of COVID, as soon as I read that section of your book, I was like, this perfectly encapsulates what I imagine those people must have been feeling. They can't have taken it seriously. They can't have been like, are you?
Yeah, like how do you like? I would not have believed the producers or whoever was telling them that. Like it sounds so fake.
Yeah.
But nope, it's happening.
It's like, yeah, at the end of it, if you don't believe, we're going to give you some extra chicken for dinner. Like, it seemed like one of those stupid ploys that they would come up with. The producers would come up with, and it just seemed so surreal. I really liked the chapter as well where you had sort of the priest who was taking it to a sort of a religious sort of place, and the untangling of that character. Sort of, where did that sort of stem from for you?
Well, I think whenever there's an extreme circumstance like this, obviously fictional, there are going to be people that see something more in it, something religious in it. And I didn't really grow up with religion, so I hope that it comes across, I don't know, legit or authentic. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but yeah, like if you saw something like that, you'd think, well, maybe there's a God and maybe this is it. But I like the idea of having that experience and then realizing, oh, actually this sucks. Like he gets spoilers, he gets ripped apart by his God, and he's like, oh, this is the worst thing I could ever experience. I regret my decision.
I just love it every time you like sort of do almost a dialogue thought for him. He's like, oh, just so disappointed. Oh,
I'm glad you like that, because I was like, I was really proud of that part.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anything else that you'd be thinking. I don't know, particularly in the circumstances of going through all the pain and stuff, but that just encapsulated everything that I just thought. And when you read it sort of with an inflection as well, just being like, oh, like I've been such a dumbass.
Man. Yeah.
What's happened? So Toothworms is a short story released separately from Inside Out, and it is disgusting. And I don't think I can ever look in my mouth again. It's gross, and spaghetti is going to be troublesome for me in the future.
Sorry.
Yeah. How did you come up with that?
So I had COVID and it was terrible. And after we were in that kind of, we don't know if we're better yet period, I got a tooth infection, and it was so incredibly painful. And I would chew on ice, so my mouth would get numb, and then all of a sudden all of the pain would come back and I would want to throw up. And I have a lot of Wikipedia deep dive rabbit holes, and one of them was the concept of toothworms, which is a Middle Ages thing where they thought that bad tooth stuff came from worms that were in your teeth. And I was like, well, I could probably just combine these things. So half of it is from my own horrible tooth infection, which is fine now, thankfully. And the other half is, okay, but what if there were worms in it? And I think it might be my favorite thing I've ever written. And I love the audio version of it, maybe even more. So I'm happy that it continues to disgust people.
It really does. And I think that's going to stay with me for quite a long time as well, because not only was it really gross and sort of it finished on this sort of perfect suggestive continuation, which you just can't kind of get away from. Like, it's not over, not to spoil it. So everyone go out there and buy it. Like I say, it's on Godless for 99 cents, but it is perfect. And like you say, the audiobook is fantastic as well. Absolutely love that. Do you have any plans to do any more sort of single release short stories?
Oh, I haven't thought about it, but I would love to. I have a couple of other works that I could consider for it, or maybe something new, but that's a great idea.
Do you ever sort of I know that you're like working on sort of longer pieces now, but do you ever just take breaks from them, that you can't carry on with this piece right now, you just need to take a break and write something else, and then just churn out a short story here, there, and everywhere?
I did recently write a short story that I had been submitting to places. It was my first erotic horror story, so that part is extra nerve-wracking because there's that added layer to it where you want it to be not scary in my case. I want it to be gross, but also a bit sexy. So I'm like, did I manage that? We'll see. The beta readers liked it, so hopefully it will find a home. And I don't want to spoil it in case it does, but yeah, I am a short story person first and foremost, so that's where I'm most comfortable, and that's why I'm having a hard time with the longer stuff, because I'm like, this should be over by now. It's just how my brain works.
Yeah, I started off that way too, and since sort of transitioning into slightly longer work, I can't do short stories as well as I could before, because I find myself just stretching narratives into too long a sequence and too.
How did you transition from short stories to longer stuff? Like, can you give me a few tips?
Well, I think the first sort of longer piece I wrote started as a short story. So the opening chapter itself was just a short story, a one and done sort of just a murder. Basically, I just wrote a big gay murder, and but I really liked the voice, and I really liked the way that I'd sort of led this character out of the situation, and it felt like there was more to be mined there. And I'd had this idea in my head a little while before about a completely unrelated story about how two people could come together under the most unlikely circumstances. And I thought this character would be really interesting in that setting. And so
so it felt they naturally kind of went together.
Yeah, they just kind of merged. And I think that's, like, I recently got a book signed as well that I've is a sequel to another one, but I'd planned this slasher like a year before, and all of the elements from that seem to fit into this story as well. So I find myself with a lot of ideas, but they all kind of interlink in some way. I don't know if that just means like I keep writing the same stuff, but they do kind of feed into each other, and it's just, yeah. But now I find my brain won't go back. I can't be as punchy as I used to be anymore. Like, it's really difficult to be sort of concise when, especially sort of, I write a lot of psychological horror, so it's kind of, a bit more in-depth thought and really inside the guy's head, so he thinks about things way too much. And so yeah, it's just really, really difficult to sort of get back to doing that again. But no, I have no tips for you.
If I could find the middle ground, that would be great. How did you say Toothworms? And it was very like punchy, and there could be more. I feel like that's every one of my stories, so that might also contribute to it, because I'm like, oh well, how am I supposed to end this? I can't have a punchy fast ending because it's supposed to keep going for another, so
in your short stories, don't you struggle to stop? Like when you get to that bit, you're like, now I want a sequel because I want to know what happened.
No, I it's almost like I go into a story knowing how it's going to end, and the rest of it is figuring out how it starts.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned in the Ledger podcast, but I have a story in Goop Troop that is about uh, fetuses, and I knew how it was going to end, but I didn't know how it was going to start and how we explain what's going on. So that part is the difficult part. I don't know. It's almost like I write with a punchy line that starts the story, and then I'm like, okay, well, how does this happen? How do we get to this line?
And that's always the hardest bit, isn't it? Like, how do I feasibly connect these 2 points?
I don't know.
You just kind of have to sit there and think. I think a lot of writing is just sitting there staring into thin air and just being like, okay, think, I can do this.
Absolutely. I am a very slow writer, and I'm a big thinker. So I just sit there and stare at the Google document for what feels like hours sometimes.
Trying to do background research and not get like picked up by the FBI.
Like I don't know about you, but like all of the tabs that I have open on my browser are like Wikipedia and random writing stuff. I like, how many tabs do you have open right now? I'm curious.
None, absolutely none.
None?
No, I've taken to bookmarking. I can't keep everything open because it gives me loads of anxiety. It just feels like unfinished work.
I can't close it because then if I close it, then I'll never see it again.
You just got to bookmark it. You got to bookmark it and then put it into a separate bookmark folder called whatever that bit's about, or whichever piece of work it's, you know, there's ways. But yeah, you can't just leave them open because eventually someone's going to find your phone when you leave it on a bus somewhere and you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You just got to look really bad.
I never let go of my phone. No one will ever get it.
I'm hoping to be buried with mine just because I don't want anyone to see my internet history.
Oh my God. You don't want to know.
Actually, yeah, all the fetuses and stuff. I can imagine there's some really interesting.
Okay, I think I need to explain myself here. I'm not like
Please.
I'm not Googling pictures of fetuses. I'm not that much of a psycho. I saw this picture of a brand of yarn and it said baby crushed velvet. And I thought, that's hilarious. And you can interpret that in a very bad way. And it was like a red velvet too. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if it was actually made of babies? This is how I think. I don't know. So yeah, I looked up how fetuses develop, because that part is disgusting and interesting, because our intestines start on the outside of our body and then they like curl up and go inside of our belly while we're in there. And I absolutely am horrified by this idea, and I don't know why. It's just I guess, they won't fit, so just do it outside and push them in.
It's surprising as well that not more people are born with their intestines on the outside. Like there must be some kind of problem in that step. Like it must happen a lot.
I'm sure there are people who are born with it, but it's probably not as common as people who are born without a butthole, which is apparently 1 in 100 people, which is like, yeah, like, I don't know, how many people do I know who didn't have a butthole?
I don't think anyone would tell you if they didn't have a butthole.
No.
I don't know anyone with no butthole.
Not unless you were getting up around there, that's a personal thing.
Dear. Well, that just evolved, didn't it? So after Goop Troop, you've got another longer book in the works. Is that right? Sort of a cosmic kind of thing going on?
Yeah, right now I'm working on Cosmic Dyke Patrol, which I pitched as like queer Ghostbusters with cosmic stuff. And it's my current project, and I'm like nervous and excited about it because it's my first like long narrative, because a lot of my stuff is very short story, and it's a learning experience, but I have a lot of helpful friends and beta feedback on it. And then it's it's already done, but it's going to come out next year, is the pirate novella I wrote with Shelley Levine called The Flesh of the Sea, which has been going through numerous edits right now, but I'm happy with it.
That's awesome. So you've got a lot of good pokers in the fire, a lot of work coming up,
Yeah.
so everyone can really look out for you. Okay, so from sort of a craft point of view, if you encounter a new writer who's looking to get into doing what you're doing, putting themselves out there, sending to submission calls, publishing, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, it's a bit complicated now because I was gonna say like you should get on Twitter, but Twitter is kind of a sinking ship at the moment. But I think just interacting with other people in the horror community, even if you're not actually like writing or doing anything, can be really helpful. There are a lot of writers groups that meet up and read each other's work, and I think it's just helpful to put yourself out there, because I would not have had any of the opportunities I've had if I didn't ramble on Twitter about them. That's how I got Bound in Flesh. It's how I met all of my friends. So you gotta like take chances, and it's so nerve-wracking, but just talk to people.
Yeah, it is, especially if you're sort of quite a timid person. I'm not very sort of outgoing kind of person, but there's a lot of people in this community who are so helpful and so friendly, and having those people to sort of bounce your ideas off is completely the best thing you can do when you're writing. I completely agree. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, The Blob. I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm wearing a Blob shirt right now.
There it is. There it is.
I've
never seen it. I've honestly never seen it.
Oh my God, you have to watch it. That's my closing. You have to watch it.
Okay.
It is honestly, in my opinion, better than The Thing in terms of the amount and variety of special effects, and the fact that it's also a remake. They do so many different things, and they take the movie into such great places in comparison to the original. That's just like some raspberry jam that chases people. And I don't know, something about it has just always stuck with me, and I really like the color pink, so that probably helps, but it's just a really good movie.
So you suggest I watch the remake and maybe ignore the original then?
Yeah, I've never seen the original Blob.
Okay.
I don't care.
I will watch it and I will report back on how traumatized I am, because I have a feeling, having read your work, that I will be traumatized by your suggestion of film as well.
Oh yeah, there's some nasty bits, but I believe in you. You can do it.
Okay, I will report back. Okay, so it's Pride Month. So do you have any recommendations for queer creators that we can check out that you personally love, whether it's film or games or books?
I really love Judith Sonnet's work. She is like the queen of disgusting. Paula D. Ashe is also an amazing writer. Like literally everyone in Bound in Flesh is great. Joe Coach and Haley Piper, of course. And there's so many people, and there are a lot of really great Twitter lists right now summing up a whole bunch of people you can check out if you want to find new people to read from. So I might retweet one of those later, and
Tag us in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of the people that you said there, I'm a big fan of myself as well. Absolutely love Judith Sonnet.
Yeah.
I recently read No One Rides for Free, and I don't think I'm ever going to recover. I'm still trying to make my way through Clown Hunt, but I'm afraid of clowns, so it's like I'll read a sentence at a time. I'll get through it in a year or so. So how does your queer identity impact your writing? How much of yourself do you put into what you write?
I think I put like probably too much of myself in my writing, but I I mean, I only have my own lived experience, so that's what I write from, and not the. I mean, I haven't had somebody pull my insides out or anything like that, but like the way that I think and the way that I speak to other people, I think comes through in my dialogue, and the way that I want to interact with people. So that includes the queer aspects of that, and it's especially prevalent in Cosmic Dyke Patrol because I'm almost like each character is like a part of me, and they're all interacting with each other.
Like multiple versions of yourself, just all having a conversation.
Yeah, it's like this is the outgoing part of me. This is the shy part of me.
So it's a really sort of personal sort of version of yourself that you're putting out there with that one.
Yeah.
Should be exposed to what it's like living inside your own head. I just wanted to know as well, sort of what does this month, Pride Month, it's a celebration of all things queer. What does that really mean to you?
I saw a post recently that said like it's great when you can finally like be your authentic weird self with your friends and not feel any judgment. And I think that applies to a lot of things, but that especially applies to queer people, because we often feel like the outsider or the weirdo. But the group of friends that I have right now is I've never felt more comfortable and more like at ease with my friends, and I hope that for every queer person. And it's a month about the history of queer people and also the future of queer people as we continue to move forward and want better things for ourselves and for trans kids, and hopefully not deal with bullshittery like we are right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad things lurking in the corners, but I think this month is a really, really good time for us just to come together as a community and really celebrate the progress we've made and the things that we do have. And then, once we've had too many vodka sodas and danced our asses off, we can go back to trying to fight the good fight. But yeah, I love this month. I think it's a really, really great month. And I'm just completely in awe as well of the amount of queer creators we have in our community and the volume of amazing work that's coming out. Tell us a little bit about where we can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter at Lorelei, LORELLI_, and on Instagram with my name, Lor Gislason. I also have a blog, lorgislason.wordpress. And honestly, yeah, just if you just Google my name, I'm sure a lot of my stuff will come up.
Excellent. And where can we buy your work?
You can get it at the Darklit Press website or Amazon, and for Bound and Flesh, you can get it from Ghoulish Books online store.
That's awesome. Well, it's been really, really nice talking to you today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm wishing you a completely happy Pride and best of luck in the future. We'll be looking out for your new work.
Happy Pride to you too.
Keep it warm. You said you loved me. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Yes, I'm to blame. I played your game. I've got no shame. Now I'm on my own.
All right, and we are back from our break, and I am sitting here with Rae Knowles. She is an author and editor. And Rae, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I am Rae Knowles. I am native to South Florida and author of the Stradivarius and forthcoming novella Merciless Waters, and recently became editor-in-chief of Lady Mantis Books, which is an imprint of Brigand's Gate Press, specializing in erotic horror.
That is so great. So anybody that listens to Cutthroat Queens is going to recognize Rae's name, because I am a huge fangirl. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I feel like I accidentally bring Rae's work into almost every episode. So I am absolutely insanely excited to get to chat with her today. So how did you get started in your horror writing, erotic writing endeavors?
Yeah, so I've shared this before, and I think it's like the silliest reason. But I watched the movie Shirley on Hulu. Okay, so it's a fictionalized version of Shirley Jackson's life when she was working on one of her novels. And, the background is that I wrote short stories in high school and was really always interested in writing. But something about watching that depiction of an author, it clicked in my brain that this is something I really want to throw myself into. And watched that movie. I said, I'm going to write a novel. I think my family thought I was losing it a little bit, but I did exactly that. I wrote my first novel, and sort of the rest is history. I think I'm working on my 5th now.
So wonderful. Was that Shirley movie? Is that the one that stars Elizabeth Banks?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I saw that. That was wicked. Yeah. I've always loved Shirley Jackson, but I had never tried. What was the Hangsaman? Like, I'd never read that book, and that was heavily in there. I've read it since, but that's awesome that, actually focusing on a horror author for once in popular media inspired, a new generation of an author.
Yeah. And, coincidentally, I wasn't familiar with Shirley Jackson's work at the time that I watched that movie, but sort of looking back, I think I've been very inspired by her voice in writing, and having especially Mary Cat, the narrator of We Have Always Lived in the Castle, that sort of strange voice that's immediately present there has been really inspiring, and something I think I've carried into some of my work.
And your work tends to lean into the Gothic, from what I've experienced, even if it's not, traditional Gothic, more modern Gothic in some cases, and hers definitely also leans that way.
Totally. Yeah. So just, kismet, I guess, meant to be.
Yeah. Maybe you're like her reincarnated or whatever.
Oh, maybe. That would be an honor.
So you said you wrote that novel. Is that one of the 2 that you have, or is it just something that back?
That will never see the light of day. So the first one I wrote, it was like a thriller, but it was just objectively bad, to a level that I'm not even interested in revising it. But hey, it got me, into the writing community, and, you have to start somewhere. So I'm grateful for it, but it'll never see the light of day. Now,
the book that did make the cut, and it was your debut novel, right?
Yeah.
Stradivarius. Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Yeah. So I worked for many years with folks who had, maybe unusual experiences, seeing and hearing things that other people don't see and hear, and really have a heart for those folks, and have seen them unfairly represented in media. So my original idea was to write some sort of story that involved unusual experiences. But that alone, that idea didn't have legs, right? That's what I call it when I have sort of a half-formed idea, but there's not enough there to actually create a project. So then I started thinking about how gaslighting as a term gets thrown around quite a bit, and my own experiences with gaslighting. And the origin of the term gaslighting, right, is from Gaslight, which was a play by Patrick Hamilton, and then adapted into a film in the late 30s starring Ingrid Bergman. And it was a really big film at the time, and it's incredible. And then that idea sort of blended with a true crime story that I heard on a podcast, in which the owner of a Stradivarius violin went on vacation and asked neighbors to house sit because of this, $1 million instrument that was in the home. And I don't recall the details, but essentially there was a torture and murder over this violin, and finding the certificate of authenticity for this violin. And I was just so struck by, obviously, the tragedy of it, but the juxtaposition between something as beautiful as a very unique instrument versus torture and murder, for the sake of greed. And so all of those three things sort of came together and became the Stradivarius.
That is so crazy. I always wondered, as I saw, the book being advertised, and when I finally got the ability to read it, how you had come to that, because a haunted violin, quote unquote, is such a absolutely insanely unique concept. I never understood how, and definitely my bag. I love when, I don't know how to put it, but when you take like a mundane object and that is like the villain of a story. My favorite thing. So I was so excited for it. And obviously we all know I loved it a lot. So as this being your debut, I've been seeing it everywhere. I'm so excited for the success of it. What have you learned about your craft and this career since it's been out in the world with people?
Yeah. So I think writing is for me like a constant learning process, but I've learned a lot about style where I feel like I thrive. And in this case, the Stradivarius is dual point of view, and it's written in third person close. And I think that since writing the Stradivarius, I've discovered that I'm actually a lot more comfortable in first person present, which is sort of, getting into writing mechanics. I don't know how many people will be interested in that, but, for me anyway, I really connect with voice a lot more when I'm writing in first. So when I look at the Stradivarius, I love it. It has a special place in my heart as a debut, but I also think my style has grown or changed, from the time that I wrote it. So there's also sort of a measure of disconnect, which is, I think, maybe common in, the world of being an author, because the time between when you write something and when it's actually out in the world is so long. Even in the best case scenario, like the Stradivarius got picked up pretty fast and put out for publication a year after I signed the contract. So that's also pretty fast in this world of publishing, but it still feels like leagues away.
I love what you said about the finding the voice, because that's, as a reader, such a key element for me, is that the author has found the voice. As a writer, I tend to be more successful writing in third person, but I always start in first person, so I can find the voice. But then I switch it all back. So
that's interesting.
I don't find a lot of success in that. But speaking of the evolution of writing and that voice, Merciless Waters.
Yeah.
That is your upcoming, is it a novella?
It's a novella.
Okay. For the listeners, if you're not familiar, there are, novelettes, novellas, and novels. Publishers kind of use different ranges for that on what they choose, but typically I would say 15,000 to 25,000 is a novelette. Anything above that, but below 40 is a novella, or 50 is
something
a novella.
Like that. Yeah.
It's a novel, but it's a little shorter. I was lucky enough to read Merciless Waters recently, and I am going to just gloat here because, oh my God, gush, that's the word, not gloat. I always use the wrong words on this thing. It was wonderful. It's probably the best thing I've read this year. Oh. It is written in first person, right? If I'm remembering correctly. And sorry, you tell me. So you tell us about it. I'll just keep talking.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm in love with this story. So I glow to hear that you liked it so much. Merciless Waters started as a throwaway tweet where I said, what if I wrote sapphic folk horror on a pirate ship? What then? Something like that. And I had such a positive response that I started to think maybe I should actually try to write sapphic folk horror on a pirate ship. And Merciless Waters was born. So Merciless Waters follows Jack and Lily, who are a sapphic couple. And I've written about these characters under different names in a number of short stories. And they generally have the same relationship dynamic, which is one sort of has some narcissistic / antisocial traits depending on the story that she's in. And the other tends to be a little on the obsessive devotee type end, and has, this very intense and sort of unhealthy love for one another. And so yeah, it takes place on a pirate ship. It's not a pirate story. I like to make that distinction for people. They're not actually pirates, but it's loosely based on Rusalka lore, which I became fascinated with, and actually have another short story starring a Rusalka. So yeah, it sort of follows this ship full of women who have no memories of before they were on the ship, until they rescue a man who's adrift at sea and slowly start to remember how they came to be on the ship. And this creates a whole lot of chaos for them.
It was wonderful. It's so neat to hear you say that, Jack and Lily were, I guess, reincarnations of characters that you utilize, because they are very fully realized. So that makes absolute sense to me, because those characters are, firmly cemented in their personality types. And I've never heard of is it Rusalka?
Rusalka, yeah.
That is such a neat concept. Can you give just a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so Rusalka, a number of countries have variations on the Rusalka. Translated, it means mermaid, but it's not mermaid as we would traditionally think of them in the United States. They don't have fish tails. The Rusalka myths, again, vary, but basically is a woman who dwells in the water, and kind of like a spirit, and likely was drowned or murdered by an abusive husband in many cases. And what I loved about them is that they are full of feminine rage and seeking vengeance. That's a theme that I love to write about. And additionally, that they are beautiful above the surface of the water and lure men into the water with their beauty. But below the surface, their true selves are revealed. So they're rotting corpses or skeletal below the surface of the water. And there's something so compelling to me about that.
The story, the book, it was extremely compelling. It kind of unraveled like a fine, I don't know what unravels, but like it was like there were different notes. You were given just the right amount of information at the moment that you needed it to keep it just intriguing enough to pull through. And then like when it all hit, you're like, oh, wow. So it was wonderful. I know that my favorite character was Jack. I adored her. She was her, correct? I
Yes.
just wanted to verify her pronouns there. But who was your favorite? Who did you identify the most with?
So I love both Jack and Lily. I think I identify a little more with Jack, and that sort of obsessive nature and striving to sort of win back a partner, whether or not that's truly in your best interest, I think. And I think and hope that's one of the questions raised in the story. And something that readers notice is that this relationship is not ideal, right? And yet, we're seeing the story through Jack's eyes, and Jack's basically sole motivation through the entire story is to get Lily back. So I think it puts the reader in a position to root for that. But I hope that simultaneously they're also seeing that like this is toxic, like this is
absolutely. Yeah, Lily was a little bit harder to love. But the ending, did not anticipate it. I will not spoil it, but I didn't expect it. But as soon as it happened, I was like, duh. I mean, that it aligns absolutely perfectly with everything else. So in this, you mentioned feminine rage. And one of the themes I think is pretty clear in this is that, is ignorance really bliss? Is forgetting your trauma a blessing, or is it a curse? And is that what you came into this with? Was that like a theme that you really wanted to push?
Yeah, so I don't think I think about themes consciously when I'm writing a story, but I can always reflect on how I felt about it afterwards. And I think I have been in lots of therapy. I have been a therapist, albeit not a great one, and only for a short time. But a question that's been raised in my own mind is certainly, is it worth it, to grapple with childhood traumas themselves, or is it preferable to sort of like start with where we are and find some coping skills and ways to move forward? So I think I do have that background, and that's something that I've considered in my own life and in working with others, is sort of like, is it worth digging up old scars specifically, right, to just talk through them, or should we just kind of start where we are? But I think more prominent for me is sort of this sense, and I won't speak for other women or anyone, but I have this feeling of dormant feminine rage that feels collective, and it feels generational. And, I wonder how much that's shared, and I hope to connect with other people who may or may not feel that as well through my work. So sort of my idea for these women on this ship that start to remember these things that happened to them was more of a collective awakening of like, what if we all just acknowledge that we're really fucking angry? You know what I mean? About things that have happened at the hands of non-women, right? Generally cis men, certainly, this is set in late 1700s, so they didn't have the language for, the gender spectrum at the time. So I'll use men for simplicity. And that's certainly the case for most of these women. But yeah, I find it really interesting to consider, what if there is this sort of collective rage of women that exists somewhere, in this universe that we may or may not be able to tap into. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think that you did a very good job of that. And I'm going to say, while you have every right, if you wanted to go into this bashing men, we all know that, and I'm using the same terminology that Rae used, since this is taken, back then, non-women, that was, they were just referred to as men. But the way that you took it felt so relatable to even me as a man. It was digestible. And I'm sure that there was information that I was able to glean from it that, maybe wouldn't have been as digestible if it was a piece just, existing to hate men. It wasn't. It was a piece existing to empower women, which there's a very discernible difference in that. And I loved it. So
thank you. Thanks for saying that. And I don't think that, well, I know that what I feel, and I hope that the message taken away is not in any way anti-man, but certainly anti-patriarchy, and certainly anti the power dynamic of women being sort of property or a convenience for men is something I'm staunchly against. And I think that anyone who is not in the role of a white, straight, cis man, probably Christian, right, in our world, anyone who's not of that is probably pretty clear that they're not benefiting from the structure of the patriarchy, and hopefully can connect to the rage in this from that perspective, even if they're not, a woman who's been harmed by men. Like, hopefully all those conditions don't exist to connect. Yeah,
absolutely. I love that theme as well. I had my younger sister's getting married soon, and I did have to sit down with her just to, because some of her posts were concerning to me, to be like, if you go into this marriage with a preconceived power dynamic, then it's nobody's going to win. So I hope that with this new generation of people that are thinking outside of the typical patriarchy, we can eliminate that, because going into anything with a preconceived power dynamic is going to set somebody up as less than their partner.
Totally. Yeah. And I hope too that the other thing people see in Merciless Waters is that I'm not at all saying that like sapphics have it figured out, right? Because the central relationship is incredibly harmful in this book. So, it's certainly not black and white. And I think anyone has the power to be really shitty to their partner. And, we all just got to make the best choices to the best of our ability.
Absolutely. I loved it. I think that you got many messages across in a very short span of time. You made me fall in love with several characters. I am so bad with names that I cannot remember the sad one.
Oh, Yinka. Yeah.
What was her name?
Yinka.
She was absolutely wonderful. And I loved the juxtaposition between her type of rage versus the other women's types of rage, because that trauma is still there, but it's a different type of trauma.
Yeah. And, Yinka came out of research into Rusalka lore, which, like I mentioned before, it talks about both women who have been murdered by a partner and women who drowned. And I just thought about the potential difference in that, right? If you drown sort of accidentally, versus, being brutally murdered. One is going to make you pretty angry, where the other one would have a different impact. So I wanted to sort of represent that. And the other shades of Rusalka lore. So I'll say not only does it vary by region, but also by period in history. The Rusalka lore predates when Christianity came to the area. And prior to the arrival of Christianity, the Rusalka weren't viewed as angry and vengeful. They were like fertility spirits. So I tried to bring that aspect in as well and really merge some different layers of it, because it does vary. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I loved it. Unfortunately, moving away from Merciless Waters, because I feel like I could sit here and talk about this just all day long. I'm very fresh off of it. I read it, I think, last weekend, and I'm just excited. So in general, I feel like the first story that I ever read of yours was the story that ended up in Taco Bell Quarterly. It was very erotic in a unique way. I know that eroticism is a big piece of your writing. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
Yeah, so first of all, that's a hell of a piece to start with. And I'll say for anyone listening, I wouldn't say that one's representative of writing at large, but if you want to ruin your own day, you can go read it at Taco Bell Quarterly.
It was so good.
So, and it's funny, I just heard Paula Ashe describe this, and it's exactly how I feel as well. I really enjoy mixing beautiful with grotesque and horror, and vice versa. So, for example, with the erotic horror, I have another piece based on Rusalka lore that is free on Seize the Press called Rusalnaya. I thought it was really interesting to use sort of erotic language and the cadence, perhaps, of erotica to describe things like fingernails grating on bone unexpectedly. So it's sort of a horrific image, but using the cadence of erotic literature, and then vice versa. I think that's fun dynamics to play with, and it really lends itself to body horror. And I just have a lot of fun with the contrast there. I'm not really into splatterpunk type erotic horror where it's very, extreme gore. It's usually really modern language, and the focus is really on the horrificness of the acts themselves. I don't really lean in that direction on the erotic horror spectrum. I really like when it's sort of flowery language and it feels, gothic or historical, but the reality of the images that we're evoking is grotesque, if that makes sense.
That. Yeah. I mean, it tracks with everything I've read of yours.
Thank you.
So part of that eroticism, the erotica that you're talking about, Lady Mantis Books, your new imprint, specializing. Is it just like erotic or queer erotic? I'm sorry, I wasn't.
So it's specializing in erotic horror, and I didn't want to explicitly limit it just to LGBTQ plus authors. However, I don't think it's any secret that I'm a huge advocate, right, of queer work, and I do explicitly invite my community to submit, because those are the stories, frankly, that I love and want to see amplified. So I wouldn't count out a story if it's not queer. But of course, queer stories have a very special place in my heart.
Absolutely. Likewise. I love being gay, and I love everything gay. I love the queer community. It is such a key, integral part to my soul. So I can say, yeah, I agree with you. So we've already discussed what it is. So how did you come to be the editor for this new imprint?
So I sort of joke that any success I've had with writing is just pure audacity. And this is no exception. When I started getting into writing erotic horror, I realized very quickly that there are very few markets for it. Once in a while, we'll get like a short story call. And for whatever reason, there's a few actually right now open, which is amazing. Roxy is doing one called The Pleasure and Pain. Obviously, I just wrapped up one with April Yates, Scissor Sisters, that's accepting erotic horror. So there's a few going on right now, but at the time, there was very little that would even consider it. And in most guidelines, they say that they don't want sexual content. So it can be hard to place erotic horror. So I was wanting to write it. I was having trouble finding homes for my own work. And in seeking it out, I was finding kind of that splatterpunk leaning erotic horror, but not a ton of what I was looking for, which was more like in the vein of The Wicked and the Willing, or, like the style of Evelyn Freeling's wonderful anthology that's coming out very soon that I always pronounce wrong, but Les Petites Moors, maybe?
I'm the wrong person for it. We interviewed them. The most recent episode was with that team, and I can't do it. I talk like a Midwestern, so La Petite Morts.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Love it. So all that to say, I felt like there was a gap in the market, and I was like, what if I asked Brigade's Gate if they would give me an imprint? And then I told myself that was audacious even for me, and I put that away for a little while, but it was one of those ideas that didn't leave me alone. And a couple months later, I ended up just saying, you know what, this is probably a wild thing to ask you, but what do you think about this, to Heather and Steve? And they really liked the idea. And, they sort of did some research into the nitty gritty of that, right? The contracting and what that would mean to set up an imprint. And the rest is history. We posted submission guidelines for a novella call that will open this fall and run through the end of 2023, with the intention of publishing 4 erotic horror novellas in 2025. And I am just so excited because I just feel like I get to read all this erotic horror for free. Like, you're just going to send it to me for submissions. Like, it's such a treat.
So you mentioned your call, and what are you looking for your 4 novellas?
So, of course, details are up there, but like I mentioned, obviously I have a special love for queer erotic horror. I think part of why I find that so interesting, in addition to sharing that identity, is there's a pretty clear narrative for heterosexual sex, and a pretty clear, even down to like order of operations, how that happens. And I've seen, quite a bit of splatterpunky erotic horror around heterosexual sex. But for queer sex, I don't think that narrative exists nearly as much. I think in general, I'm generalizing, but the LGBTQ plus community has a lot more room to play and experiment and do exactly what we want to do, what feels good and natural to us, without contending with a script. And inherent in that, I think, is a lot of room to play with erotic horror, because it's less set in stone. It feels more unexpected, which is fun in erotic horror, right? We want to be shocked and surprised and titillated and all the things. And I think that lack of scripting, I know I've had a lot of fun playing with that, with sapphic sex in erotic horror and doing things that are a little bit unexpected. Yeah, so certainly leaning queer, leaning historical. I'm a sucker for prose. I'll just say it. You know, I love prose that I can like pull a line out and frame it on my wall. I've done it. I currently have a line from This Is How You Lose the Time War printed and hung on my wall. I always have been. I love it. So I love sort of beautiful prose, historical settings. You know, I don't want to contend with cell phones all the time. Not that that's a deal breaker, but just a preference of mine. I sort of love things set back in the past. And I love body horror. I think those are some of my ways to win me over, right? In a slush pile.
You could tell that from your own work too, because there are often times where I find lines in your work where I'm just like, I shoot a picture of it to whoever happens to be around. Because sometimes it's lyrical, it's beautiful, and that's what I look for in writing. So I'm excited to read these 4 novellas.
Thank you. Yeah, when you said that actually, I mean, and this might be like hubris, but when you talk about my own lines, I just immediately think of the line from Merciless Waters, which is something like, I wanted to caress the shreds of her decay. And, I just love the line. You know, it's sort of written in the cadence of eroticism, but at the same time, you know.
Yes, I don't have my Kindle here. I highlighted some copy because you sent me the arc and I turned it into an EPUB to read, so that I can, because I can't read on a computer for very long before I do something else. That might have been one of the lines. That was beautiful. So I took some lines to highlight just to talk about. So this is a Pride episode, and nobody is going to be surprised. You know, we're talking about how much we love our queer identities, your sapphic identity, my gay identity. And it's Pride Month, which is a wonderful month, very important month to our community. What does Pride mean to you?
I've been thinking about this question, and hopefully I phrase this in a way that makes sense and doesn't sound terrible. But so I was like the last person to know that I was gay, which is funny. But truly, I had lots of experiences throughout my life, right? Starting at a really early age with other women. But I did not put this puzzle together until my mid to late 20s, which is funny, I think. So where am I going with this? I think because I essentially framed myself as a straight white woman for the majority of my life and came from an upper middle class family, I have a lot of privilege, and I acknowledge that. And I think I have come into queerness with the audacity of a suburban white woman. So to me, and I say that because I think perhaps, some members of the LGBTQ plus community have had really terrible, heartbreaking experiences at a young age. And the effect of that is that sort of pride is a way to reclaim that and push back against bullying or mistreatment that they've experienced. And absolutely. But for me, I just claim that space. And, for better or worse, someone who had my upbringing has a huge amount of privilege and often a sense of entitlement. So to me, I feel like you're going to accept queer people because what the fuck else are you talking about? I don't does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
I want to claim that and just absolutely discredit any feeling to the contrary, right? And all of my home state of Florida, all of these laws that are passed, like I talk to people in my life that are not queer, and to me, like there's no back and forth conversation to be had, really. It's kind of like get on board, or like, what the fuck are you talking about? So that's sort of what I mean with like the audacity of like a suburban white woman of like, how dare you, and just like mystified, I have no humility around claiming my identity or pride or sense that perhaps I shouldn't. Hopefully I've explained that well and not in a way that I sound like a monster.
No, I think you do. You have that right, because you're not wrong in the fact that why does it matter? I mean, like, duh, just mind your business. It has nothing to do with you.
100%. Like, who the fuck are you? What do you mean? Like, I don't know. You want to talk about your sex life? What are we talking about?
I love that. Yeah. Your pride means to you is audacity.
Yeah. I also just love audacity as an idea of like claiming space in this world. And I love the idea of like delusional confidence of like, I joke a lot about, with my wife, how does it feel to be married to the most beautiful woman in the world? And like, that's my sense of humor. I find like delusional confidence empowering and funny. And like, I carry that same level of audacity, for lack of a better word.
I'm the same way. I 100% the same way. I mean, people tell me that I'm cocky all the time, and I don't feel like I'm cocky. I just like a lot of that is my joking. I always tell everybody that I'm beautiful, smart, and funny, and like that's where those are my traits. But it's also a little bit serious, because if you call it audacity, but I just consider it, standing behind yourself, because if you do not understand your worth, then other people aren't going to understand your worth. So I think it's wonderful that you understand your worth and you rally behind yourself for it, because look what you're getting. You're putting beautiful work out into the world.
Thank you so much. And I think for me anyway, it's also a response to like pushing back, of course, insecurity, right? So when I say those things, it's very much intentionally pushing away nagging thoughts to the contrary. And I think it's very different from arrogance, because I think truly arrogant people, they like really like believe these things about themselves and in a way that wouldn't allow them to like make jokes like that. But I just think it's fun. I would so much rather joke about with my wife specifically, like, is it hard being married to the most incredible human who's ever been born? Than like, having moments of like, oh my God, am I worth anything? Am I attractive? Am I, so it's like that it's my version of like pushing that away.
And it's a little bit like putting it out into the world, maybe it'll be conditioning so that she'll understand she's married to the most beautiful woman in the world. If she hears it enough, it's true.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
It hasn't worked for my husband, but hey, he'll get there.
Well, we're working on that. We're gonna win him over one day.
That's part of my like obsession thing, like you said, because I definitely identify more with Jack as well. Like I am absolutely obsessed with my husband to the umpteenth degree, and he's not quite as obsessed back, but I don't need that because I am.
My wife about the same thing. Oh, I'm like, have you ever met anyone who is this obsessed with you? And she's like, no.
I say all the time. What queer creators should we check out?
There are simply so many. I already mentioned Paula Ashe. Honestly, Paula is like a genius and is writing on her own level of craft that is just like incomparable. There are so many layers to her writing. I'll caveat that with like heavy trigger warnings, right? So don't just walk into we are here to hurt each other and not read those, because it's very hard hitting, but gorgeous, stunning prose, so layered thematically. Cannot recommend Paula Ashe's work enough. Shelley Levine, incredible. Their writing is, again, gorgeous at a line level and really unexpected in terms of plot and theme. Really recommend their writing. Mae Murray, brilliant, right? gosh, I could go on all day, not in the horror vein, but dark fantasy. I recently read In the Roses of Pieria by Anna Burke, and that's coming out in August. So I was fortunate to get an advanced copy, but it's very much in the vein of This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is all time, right? One of my all-time favorite books. So really recommend In the Roses of Pieria if you love true enemies to lovers and epistolary, steeped in history. You will love In the Roses of Pieria. Linz McLeod. I'm so sorry, Linz. I'm sure that I'm mispronouncing her last name. But she has a novella coming out, novella. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but it's called Beast. And it's from Gate Press. I got to read an advanced copy of that. And it's sort of a prequel, like an imagined prequel to Beauty and the Beast, of Beast's origin story. And it is so steeped in history. You can really tell Linz did her research, and it's gorgeously written. So really recommend that one, which is coming out pretty soon from Brigade's Gate.
That's so wonderful. I'm so excited that our community is, taking the world by storm and putting such great queer work out into the world.
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, I could go on for the next hour recommending queer authors, but those are just like a handful that are top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be asking this question to every guest that we have on today. So we're probably, I know that some of these are going to repeat. We've talked about Paula previously in the series, or in the Cutthroat Queens, whatever this is called, and also Shelley. We discussed in the most previous episode. So this is one, you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but how does your queer identity impact your writing?
So tremendously. So obviously I want to see experiences similar to my own reflected in media. So I naturally choose to write about sapphic characters because that's what I'm interested in and that's my world. But also, I hope that I'm contributing to creating more of that media for other folks that are looking around at this very heterosexual world and saying, where am I? I hope we continue to have more and more representation in media because it's important. Very important.
So important. It's important for our little gay babies that are growing up not seeing themselves and not understanding that they're okay to be themselves. And that's what Pride is about, is us showing that it does get better. It gets great. Being gay is, sorry to the straight people, no offense to the straight people listening or the, non-LGBTQ people, but it's better.
And hey, maybe it wouldn't have taken me till my mid to late 20s to say, hey, maybe I'm hooking up with these women because I'm not straight. If there had been some representation that felt like that was an option to consider.
I almost gave you that, though. Like, I almost offered that to you, but I was like, I don't want to, tell her experience. But I do feel as though that, the normality of homophobia probably did keep you from understanding your truth because, if you could fight back against being that marginalized person, obviously you would do it even internally. So I think that that's important that you have that audacity, because I think that with Pride, you would have been able to live this happiness sooner.
Yeah, I totally think so too. And man, the terrible things I would have avoided if I had known that I was not straight earlier. It's pretty stark, right? And just, what did I have growing up? Tila Tequila? Do you remember her?
Yes.
Shot at Love with that was the big representation.
Yes.
You know.
I loved that. She went a little bit insane, like I don't think like in the real sense of insane, but she's like super, conservative now.
Yeah, weird turn.
Yeah. Danny, I was in it for Danny to win that season.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I remembered right when you said Danny who that was. But yeah, so it's just important. It just is, and it should just be a fact of life that of course we should have this representation, because why wouldn't we? It's the equivalent of like having it be rare, to see like someone having a dog as a pet in a show, but we see lots of cats as a pet. It's like, why would we do that? That doesn't make sense. That's not the reality of the world. And it's very much comparable to me. It's like, why is this like a special situation to have queer characters? Like, we're literally all over the place. Like, what are you talking about?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I cannot express the amount that I appreciate you coming to talk to me today. I was very excited to get to have this chat. You know that I fangirl very hard over your work, and I'm so excited to see your career grow even further, read more from you.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. I hope that I come across not as like an egotistical monster. That's certainly not my intent. But I do advocate for delusional confidence for anyone who's struggling with insecurities.
So I don't think you come across as egotistical at all. And I also don't think that your confidence is delusional, but I'm probably not the best person for that because I am a fangirl to the degree I very bad at being critical. But where can we find you? So where is Rae?
Sure. So I'm most active on Twitter at _Rae_Knowles. I also have a website that I do my best to keep up to date, raeknowles.com. And I'm on TikTok. I'm very embarrassed about my TikTok, so do with that what you will. But mostly on Twitter.
I love your little TikTok persona. I've been watching them recently. So
thank you, I think. I'm too old for it, but I feel like I have to be there. I don't know.
I'm working on getting the fear moved away to start doing it myself. You have to market yourself, and TikTok is a very good place to market yourself right now. But I
know it's brutal. It's brutal in your 30s. I'm trying to,
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. Well, thank you again for coming out. And if you stay tuned, we will have one more guest. We have the gentleman from Slashic Press coming up next. All right, and we are back. We are joined by a couple of gentlemen from Slashic Horror Press. We have Leeroy Cross James and David Jack Fletcher with us.
Hey guys.
Hi. Thanks so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. How are you both this fine day? I was going to say morning, but it's not morning for all of us, is it? So.
It's morning for me. I'm good. Currently really hot. It's quite hot over here, so but yeah, I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking.
And David Jack, you're coming from Australia, so
I do. I'm not sure if the accent gives me away, but g'day, mates.
Yeah,
it's actually quite cool here because we're coming to winter, so I've got the heating on behind me, which is absolutely lovely. So I'm really good.
Okay, so today is the launch day. Well, when we air, today will be the launch day of Slashic Horror Press's first release, which is Raven's Creek by David Jack Fletcher. So
Yes.
Do you want to sort of introduce a little bit about where Slashic Horror came from, and then why you decided sort of this was your premiere release?
I kind of had this idea a while ago of starting a press, and Lee and I have become really close after he interviewed me for an earlier book, and we all pretty much all we did was just talk horror, talk books, talk authors. And when I had this idea about starting a queer press, I thought I can't do this on my own, and there's no one else that I want to do this with. So I asked Lee, and he was like, "Oh my God, yes!" and it kind of just went from there. So recently, in the last couple of years, retrained to do editing and publishing because I wanted to sort of launch myself into this new career. And the experience with publishing my previous book actually led me to really have an interest and kind of a fond interest in the publishing side of things as well as writing. And so that's kind of where from my end it started coming from. And I don't know what Lee's reasons are. He was just like, yeah, I'm in, let's do this.
He looks like he's regretting it already. Like,
David Jack held me at gunpoint. And I'm kidding. When he brought the idea to me, it was something that I thought I wouldn't consider it with anyone else, put it that way. And when he described what he thought would be a good idea and how to start a queer press, it just sounded like a great fit. And something that I thought I want to be part of this journey of, and it just went from there really. And it's, do you know what, it's been a great experience so far, so I can't really complain.
Oh shucks, you guys!
I know we're so soppy.
And so, what are your respective roles within the press? Are you both editors? Do you have fancy titles?
So I'm calling myself the acquisitions editor. So I do all the in-house editing, developmental, line copy, everything. And I am qualified, just in case anyone's wondering, because I know that in this industry it's really hit and miss with those qualifications. So yeah, I handle mostly all that sort of stuff, dealing directly with the author once they've signed on, in terms of how the book is going to kind of be shaped or reshaped depending on what level of editing is needed. And Lee, what do you do, Lee?
Oh, I'm just a handyman that just is nearby if you need anything. No, I look after the marketing side of things mostly, but obviously I do other bits and bobs as well. Marketing's my day job as well. So yes, like David Jack, I am qualified. But yeah, it's just bits and bobs really. I mean, as we are essentially the team, both of us, we kind of dip in and out with bits and bobs. Like, David Jack looks after the paperback side of things, I look after the ebook side of things. So it's just that collaborative effort really on both sides of what our strengths are.
Well, I'm kind of interested in how you make it work with the time difference, though, because obviously you're only awake at the same time for about 6 hours a day. So do you get used to a lot of early mornings and late nights?
What is sleep?
I don't know, actually. It's like, when I wake up in the morning, there's usually a message there from Lee that's like saying, good morning. It's like, so I have my morning coffee and, we're texting and talking about things. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go to bed after about an hour or two. And then when it comes to my night, I'll send him a message going, good morning, because we can't know what the time difference is there. And he's like, it's too early, go away.
Yeah, there's a
if only
contrast.
you could send coffee through the internet, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have stayed up late, both of us, quite a few times, especially when we were initially setting up, like when we were thinking about logos and names for the press, and sort of like what direction we wanted to take. So we've both put in a lot of late night shifts, haven't we, Lee?
Haven't we just?
I've got to say, I love the name that you've gone with, the Slashic Horror name. I know it sort of comes from, is it Leeroy, your podcast is named Slashic Horror?
Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think it's great.
Oh, thank you. We had another name originally, and basically we had to change it. I'll just leave it at that. But we were going back and forth afterwards, and it was just an organic decision on both ends. I think that was the name, and when we both said it out loud, it just made sense.
Yeah, and it's going to suit sort of our long-term plans as well, in terms of like building a fully rounded and fully well thought out brand.
Yeah.
So with your press, you mentioned that it's a queer press. We stand that. Obviously, we want primarily only gay things in the world. I just feel like it would be a better place. I accidentally, sorry, Elton, I went on record in my last interview and we just decided that queer is better than everything else. So we're just going to keep with it. We are apparently just fully pro queer here. But what kind of work? are you looking to put out into the world?
So we are very proudly queer. That was one of the first things that we decided. We wanted to do a queer horror press. We obviously know that there are queer authors and in the horror space, particularly in the indie crowd. And there are certain avenues to get published, but we wanted to sort of emphasize that a bit because it's, for us, it came across sometimes as like, we love queer stories from other presses, but it wasn't necessarily the core focus of their business. And that's what we wanted to do, to help create this space where that is the core, and that's exactly what we're here for. So if that's the sort of story that you want to hear, or you want to read, then you know exactly where to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it was important to us as well to make a space where, I mean, at the moment, let's just face facts, our community is in trouble, really. And we just wanted another space for people to come and it's basically a safe space to read queer horror, see queer authors, and why not make it just a happy place for people to come to.
Absolutely.
See, and I love that because you get to automatically know when you see a Slashic that it's going to be supporting our community and the people that we love. And also you're going to be consuming media that you can see yourself represented in. And I love that guarantee.
Yeah.
And also it kind of helps as well with the appropriation conversation as well. If you've got queer horror authors submitting work to you, they're not going to be its own voice stories. So you don't have to worry about sort of visibility versus appropriation kind of problems. You just know that it's coming straight from the heart and from the lived experience of somebody from the community. So
absolutely. And one of the things that we really don't like is that sort of tick box exercise where it's if people say to us, we could rewrite this character to be gay if that's going to help it get accepted, and it's like, probably not actually, because there's not that sense of authenticity there, and it's almost just you doing it to get published rather than doing it for a particular reason. And as you were saying about own voices and lived experiences and things like that, that's important.
Yeah, I think that's why we set up this podcast, wasn't it, Brett? We just wanted to be able to sort of give people from marginalized communities that space where they could go and they could share their stories. And I can't be more sort of proud for you guys having launched this, because it looks like it's going to be an incredible journey for both of you.
You pre-ordered Ravens Creek already then to help support us? Thank you.
Absolutely. Don't start on me. I'm very tired. So are you planning to sort of venture into the anthology side of publishing, or are you focusing mainly on longer works now, novellas and novels and novelettes?
Yeah, anthologies are in the pipeline as well. Eventually, we just wanted to kind of get the ground running with a couple of longer form books first, just to get some authors on our roster. We've just had some recent signings as well, which we're very happy about. I'm allowed to reveal it because it's already out there, but yeah, we've recently signed Mark Allen Goodalls, who's been in this community for a long time, and he's a queer author that people know very well. So yeah, we're very happy about that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
No, in terms of the anthologies, one of the things that when we were setting up, I think both of us, probably more me than Lee, got a little bit carried away. That's sort of in my nature. And I was like, we can do anthologies and we can do this and we can do that and we can have these themes. And then it was like this whole list of different themes. And Lee's like, I'm going to have to rein you in. And I'm like, no. And he's like, I'm going to have to rein you in. I'm like, okay. But so what the outcome of that was, we essentially have 2 years worth of anthology calls. So we've got them all drafted up, and we've got basically a schedule in place that my overthinking brain created. And I don't really know when I did that, but it sort of just came to be. And now we're just waiting for the right time, to start launching that, because we have had so much interest, which I was a little bit surprised by, but really kind of warmed by at the same time. And now we want to put our efforts into what's happening there first and get all that stuff sorted. Get these titles out. Show the authors up front that they're our priority, and that's what we only exist because of them. And then once we've sort of gotten into that rhythm and have a bit of an audience and a bit of a feel of the space, then we'll know which of those anthology themes that we can start with and start entering that space.
Awesome. Which leads us on to Ravens Creek. Today, the launch of the longest book I've read in a while. How many words was it, David Jack?
Like 95 or something. It really wasn't that long.
It's got to be closing in on 100,000 words.
Oh.
It's a big boy. He's a big boy.
He's well fed, you mean?
Absolutely, he is big boned.
What was your inspiration to write Ravens Creek?
So this one started from an open call submission. And it was initially, I can't remember who it was with, but it was a survival horror, 6,000 word limit. And I thought, it's not really something that I've done before. I'll give it a go. And so I just sort of, I thought, what could I do? And then the ideas just started coming from there. By the time I looked up from the iPad, because I do a lot of writing on my iPad, I think I was at about 20,000 words. The open call had ended. And I was like, I don't know. But so in terms of the plot, I obviously had to do something about survival horror, and I knew I wanted it to be centered around a gay married couple, and like the connection between those two characters. I knew that I wanted that to be sort of a central focus there. And then I also knew that I wanted, as the story progressed, for it to keep the tension, to keep building, not give the reader too much of an opportunity for a breath. And kind of keep the insanity kind of going worse and worse and worse. And that's why, when they keep going down, the further below ground they go, the worse shit gets. And so for that inspiration, I turned to Cabin in the Woods, the film, which I feel that does that quite well. Especially when they take the elevator down into the facility, and it's just this all out sort of craziness. So that's it.
I mean, I was going to start off the round of questioning to you with, "Are you okay?" Just it's a very extreme book.
Elton, I need help.
What's your primary diagnosis? So what was like the idea behind having this be the first release for Slashic Press then? Was it just that it was the most polished project you had, or did you want it to be you to go first?
Actually, I wrote this. I wrote Ravens Creek probably about a year before we even thought of Slashic Horror. And my intention was, because I'd had a few short stories, and then I'd had my novella published, and the intention was to try and just enter that sort of publishing arena through a small indie press. And I started submitting at places. I had a bit of interest. By the time the publishers got back to me, and this is just the nature of the game, right? By the time they got back to me, I'd already done my next revision, and so their feedback was really insightful, but not necessarily relevant for the new version. And so I thought, do I send it back to them, because I did have a few offer to send it back, or wait a few months for more feedback, or do we really back ourselves, put our names to the company, and make this our first release? And ultimately we just thought, we thought it's going to look a lot better if, we're confident enough with our own work to put it up in this press, and that we're proud of this press, that's probably going to attract people as well. Yeah. So the intention initially, I was sending it off to all sorts of places. I think I sent it off to Penguin at one. Like, I sent it off to a lot of places. I was like, read my book. But but I honestly could not be happier that we've gone the way that we've gone. We've learned a lot of lessons with the creation of this book. And that was also one thing that we wanted to do, is that if we're entering this publishing space, we don't want to be sort of like guinea pigging or like testing our processes on someone else. We want to do this right the first time, and let's do it on my book. So, and I think we've done pretty well, if I say so myself.
All those late nights were worth it.
Or early mornings.
Or early mornings, yeah.
Without spoiling too much, because this is the release date for the book. We don't want to ruin it before anybody gets to read it. A theme that I noticed is kind of prevalent throughout was kind of your juxtaposition between, human monsters, actual monsters, and then humans becoming actual monsters. And I found that very relatable, because it's a gay story. And as a gay man living in the United States Midwest, humans are my monsters. Was that intentional? Did you go into that survival story knowing that that's where you were going with it?
Not originally, because it was supposed to just be the 6,000 words. It was just going to be a quick in and out sort of bang. But then I decided, as it started to get a bit longer, that theme just sort of started emerging, because, pretty much all writers will say that, right? They'll just be like, the story tells itself. And in this case, it sort of did just start emerging. And then one of the people in my local writing group, I think, actually picked up on that. And I thought it was unintentional, but I really liked that aspect of it. And so I played on it a bit more. So, and I think with horror, particularly as a genre, it often does make critiques and comments about society. And so the idea of like the monster is really, really kind of cogent today. It's really something that's topical, and people are, talking about it in more abstract ways than they used to. And so I decided that the idea of the monster, and it being a creature feature, sort of also made sense. But it's not necessarily about the bodily form that we take, but around our morals and where our ethics fall, and how our ethics can actually fail us, and really blurring that line between human and monster, essentially. Yeah.
And one of the things that I really enjoyed was the strength of Michael and Jeff, because a lot of times in queer fiction, even with queer authors, the line between, those gay, Elton, help me with the word.
Archetypes.
Stereotypes. Yeah, sorry. We still throw them in there, and I feel like Michael and Jeff were just kicking ass and taking names. And there's no question here, but that was something that I appreciated. I like seeing a strong ass gay character in a story, and they're strong for no reason other than the fact that they just are, because we are.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you picked up on that. I don't know if my husband's going to listen to this, but I sort of based the dynamics of the relationship on us, like on our real relationship. Not to say that like that's where the strength comes from. It's more just like the way that they interact with each other, because that's a very human thing. That, interaction between people is very human. And then the rest of it sort of, and because it's survival horror, you've got all the weapons and everything. So I knew that sort of personality needed to be there. I didn't, and one of the things that I really like to do with my writing in general is to try and avoid those stereotypes, because one, I personally think they can be harmful, but if that's all people are kind of digesting or consuming in the media. Not everyone is Jack from Will and Grace. And for a long time, even when I was at high school, and people, because I came out in high school, people would be like, but you don't do what Jack does on the show? And I'm like, yes, because I'm a human and he's a character.
You're
But
like David Jack.
I actually have been known to do that on occasion. But yeah, so that's one of the things I like to try and do with my writing, is to try and make the characters, whether they're gay or not, as human and realistic as possible.
Yeah, that definitely came across. Another character that I thought was very human was Adelaide.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I enjoyed her a lot. I feel like she was probably my favorite in the end. And so which character did you identify the most with?
So when you sent me the question list and I saw that, my immediate thought was, oh, Adelaide for sure. But then I thought, actually, is that me just saying that because of what happens to all the other characters? And then I thought, in terms of people's goals and desires, regardless of how they go about it, their goals and desires, and what kind of lives in their heart. And so for that reason, I'm going to say probably Michael. So without trying to not spoil it, obviously a protagonist, but he lives for his husband. Like their love is super strong. It's unbreakable. It's unshakable. And throughout the entire book, they never argue or anything. It's just like, we're in this together. And I think that's the way that my husband and I are. Even when I'm super annoying, we just don't argue. So, but his desire for family as well, because that's a running theme throughout the book, is this quest for family, and what does family actually look like in the end. And that's something that really resonates with me a lot, based on my own experiences with family.
Yeah, I just think all the themes in this book as well are very sort of present, current to sort of the world now. And I think it's a very layered and contextual kind of commentary about today's world, but also done in such an impressively buildy kind of way, that the different changes of point of view from different characters, the different timings, it's very clever. And I think everyone who's going to pick up a copy immediately after reading this, listening to this, is going to really enjoy what you've produced here. I think it's a fantastic debut for Slashic Horror Press, and I think it's going to do amazingly well.
Thank you.
It's all right.
I should have got you to do a blurb for the front.
Oh, it's okay. I'm not famous. It's fine.
So Lee, you are not off the hook. I was told, and this might be incorrect because sometimes Elton lies to me outright. I was told that you are working on a book to be a release for Slashic as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There's actually two. So I wrote a book called Camp Silver Oaks, which I self-published originally. Basically we are going to do a re-release of Camp Silver Oaks through Slashic Horror, and the sequel originally was going to come this year, but it'll be next year now. But I'm working on Camp Silver Oaks too, and I'm also working on something. I can't talk too much about it, but basically it's my tribute to Toby Hooper, who was one of my favorite directors, and he did some really awesome films. I'm sure we all know the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Eaten Alive, Poltergeist. So it's kind of a tribute to him. But something that really resonates with me about when I do write is, I think of writing as, because I'm very visual, I like to base my writing on films I would have liked to have seen with a character like me, aka gay, in that scenario. So that's something that's important to me, that when I write, basically.
And Camp Silver Oaks is a YA, correct?
It is. A lot of the inspiration behind that one, it kind of came from Goosebumps and Fear Street and Point Horror, those sorts of books from when we grew up, but I wanted to make it for the people who read them in the 90s for now. Yes. So it's a bit more mature. So it kind of is like that mashup of Friday the 13th meets a Goosebumps book, basically.
Oh, I love that. That's my favorite genre. Quick horror
Oh,
books
thank
for
you.
grown-ups. I love it. It's my thing.
A young queer youth being able to see themselves in something is so important. And I don't care what anybody says about it. You know, we know who we are from a very young age, and having that ability to see ourselves is paramount to the mental health of our next generation.
I 100% agree with that, and it's like I said. Then, you know, growing up, I would always watch these films or read these stories, and I'd think, "Oh, I want to be this person. I want to be Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. I want to be," but obviously, I didn't see myself. Obviously, now through rewatching a couple of films, I'm like, I know what the directors and writers were doing with this character, but. But obviously it wasn't prominent. So yeah, that's something that's when I do write stories, they are very much based on the films I would have loved to have seen when I was younger, basically.
One thing that I also love is about making the queer character the protagonist rather than the person on the side that gets killed first.
The quirky best friend.
Yeah, and you know, and they always sort of do the stupid thing, or they say the stupid thing, or they're there purely for entertainment value for the audience to laugh at and to make fun of, essentially, and then they get killed, you know, first or second. Whereas what we're doing and what other great queer authors are doing is kind of reshaping that whole narrative and making us the stars of the show, which I absolutely love.
Yeah. And making us complex enough to be the villain as well, which is also a lovely addition that I think people are starting to come around to now, is actually getting out your gay villains and having them just be the horrific character. It's not just some middle-aged white guy living on a farm in the middle of America.
I think it's important, though, to sort of, on that point, think about the idea that they're not a villain because they're gay.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is something that we've seen in film before, where it's like the big reveal is, you know, in Psycho, he's wearing his mother's clothing and things, and it's like, oh, that explains it. Well, it doesn't actually explain anything. You know, like, that's ridiculous. But so I think the important point there is that when, you know, the gay or queer character is not a villain because of the queerness.
Yeah, 100%.
But don't tell us we can't do anything, because we can even be your villains. So.
Exactly, 100%. 100%.
Okay, so we have a final round of questions for you guys, and it's more personal now. It's not necessarily about sort of the press or the release, but what exactly does pride mean to you?
So to me, like, fundamentally for me, it's about being unapologetically you, not putting on airs and graces for people to try and fit into what they believe you should be. You know, but also appreciating the fact that, like, I'm gay, but I'm not the only type of diversity in the world. So pride encompasses all of that diversity. And for me to feel that pride and to engage in that space of pride is to appreciate and value and recognize the diversity of others as they are, rather than what I want them to be or what I might perceive them to be. And also celebrating it every day. Like, I know we get Pride Month now, and it's like, you know, that's great. But for me, it's something that has to happen every day. You know, that's, for me, it's a lived experience that I need to carry forward for other people who might not be in a position to do that. And that's something that I think Slashic is sort of doing by publishing those queer voices and being unapologetically queer. Like, yeah, give us your non-binaries and everyone, give us your trans, give it all to us. Not that we're greedy, but, you know, that's what
we want them all.
Yeah, but, you know, so that's what it is for me.
That's wonderful. To you have the right to take up your space in the world, and I'm glad that you're bringing a press forward and taking up that space, because it's important. How about you, Lee?
I mean, David Jack just said that beautifully, so I will give you an abbreviated version. Pride to me is about being authentic to yourself and putting two middle fingers up to the haters who try and take you down.
Yes.
I like your version better. I'm very
Certainly
wordy.
makes a better sound clip. And do you guys have any sort of recommendations, your favorite queer creators that our listeners can listen to or reach out to, look up during Pride Month or throughout the year that you recommend yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I will start off with one of my personal favorite queer creators, which is also a fellow Liverpudlian, which is Mr. Clive Barker. Famous for writing the books of blood, the Hellbound Hearts. He's written just some fantastic queer stories. He's brilliant at world building. His books and his stories, that mixed genre of horror, thriller, fantasy. He's the whole package. And I obviously you can tell I'm very passionate about him. I even did one of my essays during my degree about him. So, but yeah, Clive Barker's definitely one I would recommend highly. And I'm going to also plug one of our authors because I was a fan before we signed him, which is Mark Allen Gunnels. 2B is an excellent novella, and Before He Wakes is just a fantastic thriller. So if you haven't read those books, guys, check them out. They are fantastic.
Excellent.
I'm going to go a little bit more local, like to Australia. So, Aaron Dries is excellent. He's just won some awards, an Aurealis Award. His stuff is just so beautiful writing. And Leanne Pearson is another queer author. It's a bit of a strange spelling. Leanbh is how you spell Leanne's name. So she's Australian as well. Absolutely brilliant. And of course, now going overseas to Jonathan Edward Durham. I read Winterset Hollow in one sitting, and I just thought his storytelling was absolutely beautiful. So, and the horror was like horrific. So it was great. I really loved it. Yeah, so I think that any work by any of those three people, definitely check them out.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We're going to finish up with a short reading from Ravens Creek.
The building above sounded empty, looked at too from the cracks in the floor overhead. She didn't trust her eyes. They'd lied to her before. And besides, the floor above had been reinforced for soundproofing. Still, a few cracks had made their way to her. She could make out shadows sometimes when the light up there was just right, when the strips of sun allowed it. She still couldn't trust her eyes. Her ears, though, they hadn't failed her yet. The sun was going down, which told her that her captors were going away for a little while. Best she could tell, they were underneath a barn, decked out with top-of-the-line security to keep her and the others inside, powerless. From the darkness, she'd studied them, learned their habits, their routines. She didn't know what they did when they weren't here, didn't care. All that mattered was that this was her chance. There might be others, but her mother's voice echoed in her mind. No time like the present. She hated that woman, though facts were facts. And now was the time. The shackle at her ankle was rusted, hadn't been cleaned in some time. She'd used that to her advantage. Rusted metal was weak. In the first few days of her arrival, she tried to dig her way out. Her efforts were in vain, but with the dirt being more like clay. Between thick clumps, she'd stumbled upon something useful, a screwdriver. However that got there, she didn't care. She plucked it from the earth and kissed it, holding it close to her chest so she knew it wasn't a dream. The screwdriver was old and weak. Still, it was something. In that moment, picking off dirt and clay, it was everything. She tried prying at the shackles with the screwdriver for a while until it became clear it was no good. It wasn't strong enough to break the metal apart. She looked around for a solution. There was always a solution. And it hit her. The bricks, the mortar. Their prison was homemade, built from manpower and bricks and cement. The mortar scratched away easy enough. It just took time. She'd used the screwdriver to do that for weeks. Or was it months? Time meant nothing down here. The mortar was a pile of dust now, the bricks loose enough to grab. Stop, one of her companions hissed through the darkness. They'll catch you and you know what happens then. The woman ignored her, continued struggling with the brick. It came loose, heavy in her hands from lack of hydration and sustenance. Even in her weakened state, she found the energy to smile. Please, the voice whispered again, her urgency shrouded by desperation. I have to do this, the woman replied, angling the brick above her shackled ankle. She brought the brick down as hard as she could, closing her eyes at the clang against metal. She smashed the brick against her chain again and again. Others in the dark covered their ears and mouths, afraid to make any sound in case their captors heard. The metal began to crack, spores of rust floating through the air as the woman beat her chain once more. It fell to the dirt with a low thud. She was free. The knowledge that she just gained some power kept the woman still for a moment. It could be a dream. She could have died from hunger in her sleep or suffered a fever and conjured up a dramatic escape in her head. Except the chain was in the dirt. She held it in her hands, held it toward the other prisoners. Anyone who wants to come with me? Her voice was firm and powerful. Now's the time. From a corner somewhere in their prison sounded a low voice. Just a scratch, the throat dry and weak from the initial screaming. It lasted no more than a day before it was beaten out of her, out of all of them. Me, the rasp said. Take me. The woman crawled toward her, unable to stand just yet. Brick firm in hand, she beat the woman's chain until it too fell to the earth, powerless. She knew from the position that this girl was one of the more recent additions to the collection. This girl was their favorite too, getting more meat and fresh vegetables. Nobody knew why. The woman knew one thing about her. She'd seen their faces. Maybe even knows them. Beyond screaming at them on her first day down here, she hadn't said much, never spoke loud enough for anyone else to hear her. In the dark, she looked young. It was hard to tell through the layers of dirt and grime. Her eyes were a deep blue. No amount of filth could hide their beauty. The woman reached around Blue Eyes' shoulder and brought her forward. Anyone else? She asked. You don't have to stay here. Some shaking heads. Fear is an incredible force, she thought, and some nods. The woman went to work on the chains of all who wanted to come with her. Blue Eyes told them about her parents' farm, plenty of room for everyone. They could make it. They just had to get out of this dungeon, back upstairs to the barn. 4 of them in total. The woman was unsure how many she was leaving behind. They all had a choice, and it was theirs alone to make. The monsters would be back soon. She left the brick in easy reach of anyone who wanted it, and gripped the screwdriver as tight as she'd ever held anything. The 3 who were coming with her waited by the ladder to the dungeon door, unsure of their next move. And I'll leave it there.
My God.
How's my reading?
No, that's brilliant. It's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you read at least a 3rd grade reading level. Well done.
To be nice to our guests.
Sorry.
You did better than I did. I did a reading of Camp Silveroaks in front of some second-year students at my old university. And the anxiety got to me, and I was dripping with sweat, and I was stumbling for words, and then they just gave me a massive round of applause afterwards, and I was like, yeah, I could tell it's because I look really nervous.
Yeah, readings aren't easy, so thank you, David Jack, for doing that. That was an excerpt from the brand new novel, Ravens Creek, coming out today from Slashic Press. Thank you both so much for coming.
Slashic Horror Press.
Slashic Horror, for fuck's sake. Oh, Jesus Christ.
You were fine.
I was trying. You could have just left it.
You have to leave
I couldn't
record it. You have to.
Oh yeah, we do.
We're
put it on a fade
we're
out, just a bickering constantly.
very lazy.
Me calling Chelsea a cow or something. Yeah, thank you both for coming and joining us and telling us about this. We wish you the best of luck with the release. Ravens Creek, it's out today. Get your copy now. We will link everything below through all social media, and that is coming from Slashic Horror Press. There we go.
Yes, Slashic Horror Press. So one thing I did want to find out, each of you. So where can we find you and your other work? Do you have any websites, links, anything like that?
Yeah, I have a website called fletcherhorror.com, and that links into my editing business, Chainsaw Editing, as well. And then on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and anyone listening that's from Maitland, New South Wales, just come for a coffee.
You can find me on social channels, so at Leeroy Cross James with 2 E's, not 1, on Instagram, and Zombie without the E Leeroy at Twitter on Twitter.
Follow them on socials. Pick up your copy of Ravens Creek today. And thank you guys for joining us today. It's been amazing.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, guys. You guys are amazing.
Mwah.
You never loved me. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Hook, line, and sinker. You didn't love me. I bit down hook, line, and sinker. I'll never know what made you go and be so low.
Okay, and that's it. That's our episode. It's been Pride Month, and if you are so inspired, there are thousands of fantastic charities out there who could benefit from even the smallest donation from people who support and encourage the ongoing struggle for equality of all the people from the queer rainbow. Thank you very much for listening. We are the Cutthroat Queens. You are welcome.
You said you loved me. I brought it hook, line, and sinker. Guess I'm to blame. I played your game. I've got no shame.